in this week, and I would like to welcome everyone to this new week and to thank the teachers who managed to bring us on board last week and are continuing this week. Welcome the new schools that are joining us this week, and we pray that the good Lord will guide us through this whole week. I want to thank you, the students, for the good listening skills and the good behavior you are demonstrating online. And I want to request those who write in the chats to avoid writing what is not very important to us. Write only questions or comments that are related to the work we are doing, because when you populate the chat, our recording goes with a lot of unuseful things. But I want to wish you the very best today and hope that I will follow through as I travel. Thank you, and I declare this session open.
Thank you so much, Principal Education Officer, and wish you a safe journey to Bull. Okay, we are set, and you're most welcome, Teacher Seven.
Okay, my name is Segia Godifrey, and I'm going to be a facilitator for today. So we're going to have parts, part 1 and part 2. So for section 8 has 3 compulsory items. And then for section B, it has 2 parts, whereby each part is having 2 optional items, where you choose only one. So when it comes to the item structure, every item assessed in biology will have 2 parts. So one part assesses understanding of the biology, and the other part assesses the application of the biology. So it may not necessarily be part A and part B, but at least there I would be assessing the understanding of the biology and then assessing the application. So if we start with item 1, when it comes to the understanding part, so we have the first assessment can be done on effect of destruction of structures on normal functioning of a given plant. When we are constructing our response structure will have destruction or destroying or damage of structures reduced to the rate of the process due to reduction in surface area. Then for the function, since the structures have adaptations. So down there we have an example of how such a response can look like, that if in case we have damage of leaves, so when you have damage of leaves, reduce the rate of photosynthesis due to reduction in surface area for absorption of light, since leaves contain chlorophyll. So implying that in this case, the structure being damaged are the leaves. So the process whose rate is being reduced is photosynthesis. And then the function that is being affected, that's absorption of light. And then the adaptation for the structure is going to be chlorophyll. So meaning that in the task, you'll be asked to explain how is the damage to a certain structure, or how maybe the hailstorm, the strong wind, or anything affected normal functioning of the plant. That's how we can construct our response. So then to continue the second part, we can be assessing the effect of plant modification by a given condition on normal functioning of the plant. So in this case, you're going to be given maybe prolonged drought, maybe flooding, or anything. And when we are constructing our response, so we'll have the condition, cause the modification, which resulted into reduction of the rate of a certain process. For example, as you can see there, so the prolonged drought caused the drooping of leaves, this resulting into reduction in surface area for light absorption, so reducing the rate of photosynthesis. So in this case, you realize that a condition is going to bring about a modification within the plant, but that modification will end up affecting the normal function. So in that case, they will ask you, for example, how the condition in the village affected the normal functioning of a plant. So you have to look out for those modifications within the item and within the scenario, and then respond as you can see there. So then the third, we go to understanding. So plant modifications caused by nutrient deficiencies. So in this case, you're going to be given symptoms within the scenario. So which symptoms will now sign lack of certain nutrients within the plant, so brought about by a given condition. So for that case, when you are constructing your response, you need to have the condition. Condition can be flooding, can be waterlogging, and so on. So the condition caused the lack of a nutrient, which resulted into reverse function, causing a plant modification. So when we talk of reverse function, so that would be the reverse function of a given nutrient that is lacking. Let us take an instance. If you are given the symptom and the symptom is rotten root. So when you are constructing your response, you have that, let's say, flooding caused lack of oxygen, resulting into poor respiration, causing rotten roots. So meaning within the symptoms that will be given to you in the scenario, one of them will be rotten roots. Okay. When it comes to the application part, so we have how plants manage to survive. So in the task, they will ask you to explain how the plants manage to survive under certain conditions. So in this case, when we are constructing our response, we shall have the plant modification plus the adaptive effect. So for instance, here, if plants fold in their leaves, so that means, okay, let me first finish, then I'll respond to those raising their hands. So folding of leaves reduce the surface area for transpiration, conserving water for photosynthesis and growth. So implying that our modification here is the folding of leaves, and the adaptive effect is going to be to reduce the surface area for transpiration, conserving water for photosynthesis and growth. So in turn, that will help the plant to survive and produce some yields. So the second part, for the application part, is how plants manage to behave the way they behaved. So take an example of the scenario of last year. So in this case, when we're writing the approach for the response, so you need to have the modification, and then you need to give the reason. So for example, if you have many branches, so many branches were due to elongation of the terminal buds. In this case, the modification is having many branches, so the task will be asking you to explain how plants manage to have many branches. And that will be due to the elongation of the terminal buds, or the increased cell division in the terminal buds. So then there are some processes you need to read about under understanding. And this is the photosynthesis and translocation of food, absorption and transportation of water and mineral salts, fertilization in flowering plants, and fruit formation, then primary and secondary growth. So as you prepare, there can be some tasks that may be asking you to explain such processes. But now here, when you are dealing with processes, you need to have the correct logical flow of the process, because the scoring will stop at that point where your process stops to be coherent. So maybe before we go to the scenario, there's someone here raising up a hand. Yes, Katshami? Katshami, can you unmute and ask your question? Okay, I think she's not on. So let's continue. Now here we have a sample scenario, and we want to apply some of the knowledge we got up there. So you are provided with a scenario where you have George is a prominent farmer in Masaka district, and it's during the dry spell where he decides to grow. Kashawi, can you unmute and ask your question? Hello? Anyone from Garden High raising up the hand? Hello?
So I would like to ask you about how plants in the desert manage to survive, and also how the plants are able to recover from the conditions they face.
Okay, you can unmute. So you can mute again.
Yes, good afternoon, sir. I mean, good evening, sir.
Okay, good evening.
So I wanted to inform you that your voice is low.
Okay. All right. Now, someone who asked about how the plants are able to survive. So how the plants are able to survive, that will go back to this point here. So because survival for example, in the desert will require plant modifications such as developing leaves into thorns, but now that requires an adaptive effect. So if the leaves are modified into thorns, so the question is how adaptive is that important to the plant for it to survive? So this implies that, for example, leaves developing into thorns reduce the surface area for transpiration conserving water for the plant, sorry, for photosynthesis and growth of the plant. So implying that you will look at the adaptations for desert plants, but when you're constructing your response, they need to be in line with the response that it needs to be in line with the adaptive features given in the scenario, unless if it is left open and then you are asked to explain how it can survive. Then there you can come up with any of the responses that are in line with adapting to excessive transpiration within those kind of regions. But if there are those given in the scenario, then you only explain and stick to those given scenario. So you don't bring in others from outside. So then how the plants were able to grow again, that is now where this second response comes in. So maybe developing many leaves. So due to rapid elongation of the leaf buds or increased cell division in the leaf buds, developing thick stems due to increased cell division within the mesems and so on and so forth. So those are the two application sites that we have for plant biology. So it can either be how plants manage to behave the way they behave, or how they manage to grow again, something like that. Or it can be on the other side where you have an adaptive feature. So where you have an adaptive feature which is mentioned that will help the plant survive within certain prevailing conditions. So the person from Garden High, I don't know whether your response, you got response to your question. You can unmute and tell. Okay, so anyone who can read for us the scenario. Anyone that can read for us the scenario. Yes, St. Nathan High, you can read.
Are you hearing me?
Any member of St. Nathan High, you can read.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
You can get me?
Anyone from St. Nathan High?
Are you getting me?
Yes, you can read. Yes, I'm hearing you.
George is a prominent farmer in Masaka district. During a dry spell, he decided to grow his beans in a waterlogged swamp near his farmland. However, his beans developed rotten roots, stunted growth, weak stems, and yellow leaves. However, during that period, his plants developed narrow, hairy lamina. Their leaves folded during the day and straightened during the night. A few survived and produced some yields. Task A. Explain how the conditions of the swamp caused the symptoms seen in the bean plants. Part B. Explain how the plants managed to survive to produce some yields. That is the item.
All right. Now, you can mute. Now, if I can ask, anyone who can tell us out of the three areas we talked about that are assessed under that are assessed under the understanding part. Anyone who can tell us which ones of the three are we looking at? Because we had the effect of destruction of structures on normal functioning of the plant. The second was plant modification by a certain condition affecting normal functioning. And the third one was nutrient deficiency. So anyone from Buembe, you can unmute. Anyone from Buembe? Anyone from Kagure? Hello? Okay. Durban girls, anyone from Durban girls, you can unmute. Anyone who can tell us, you can unmute and tell us. Anyone from St. Andrew Kagwa? So anyone from Serere, you can unmute and tell us.
So maybe you can repeat the question.
So the question is, we had the scenario here. So we wanted to understand out of the understanding parts that we had 3 of them. So when we look at here, we want to understand which area are we taking or are we going for the 3 areas that we talked about. And to go up here, I was trying to show you the 3 areas we've talked about under the understanding part. So the first one is the effect of destruction of structures, normal functioning of the plant. Then the second one was effect of plant modification by a condition on normal functioning of the plant. And the third one was plant modification caused by nutrient deficiencies. So those are the 3 areas that we have. So we want to look through here and ask ourselves, when you look through the scenario and you look at the task part A, so of the 3 parts, which one do you think we're going for? Yes, someone from Chibuku, you can unmute and tell us. Someone from Chibuku? Okay, someone from Captura, you can unmute.
Application.
Now let us
The
start with the
answer is
understanding part. Yes?
the application is application 3. Plant modifications caused by nutrient deficiency.
Plant modifications caused by nutrient deficiency. Yes. So how many symptoms are we seeing in the scenario? How many symptoms are we seeing in the scenario?
There are 4.
You can mention and we see.
Stunted growth, weak stems, yellow leaves, and the roots got rotten.
So, anyone who can construct for us a response to do with stunted growth? So the first question is, what are the nutrients you think that will be lacking for stunted growth?
Lack of calcium and phosphorus.
Anyone who can construct for us?
Stunted growth. Construct something on stunted growth.
Anyone from Bukedia?
Yeah, this is Bukit College Kachanga. Are you getting me?
Yeah, I'm getting you.
Yeah, we have unmuted. We have come up with the part 3 uprise for part A, which says that plant modification caused by nutrients deficiencies, where waterlogging caused the lack of oxygen, resulting into poor respiration, causing rotten roots. So are you getting? So are you getting me on the network? They were still there, please. Okay. Then part one applied for part how plants managed to survive, whereby there was the folding of the leaves during the daytime, then they would then during night time they could unfold, allowing the photosynthesis to take place, whereby there was reduced transpiration to the atmosphere, hence allowing the plant to make the starch, which was essential for the making of the food, which enabled to grow to create some yield.
Okay. Okay, now Francis, are you raising up your hand? Okay, you can mute. All right. Now, when you check here, we're having the rotten roots, the stunted growth, the weak stems, and then the yellow leaves. Now you realize that since we are talking of nutrient deficiencies, So we're going to look at the efficiency of oxygen for rotten roots, and the reverse function here is going to be poor respiration in the roots. Then for stunted growth, we're going to look at the nutrient which is deficient, being nitrogen, which will now result into poor protein formation as the reversed function. Then the weak stems, we're going to look at calcium or magnesium, whose reversed function is going to be poor. It's going to be poor cell wall development. And then we shall have the yellow leaves, whose reverse function is going to be chlorophyll production due to lack of either magnesium or nitrogen. So you can choose one of the two. So if I go back to how the structure of that response is going to be. So in this case, we are having waterlogging in the swamp. So it's the condition. So cause the lack of, for example, calcium, resulting into poor cell development, causing weak stem. So remember, the response structure is the condition. So in this case, our condition is waterlogging. So cause the lack of a nutrient. So the nutrient we are talking about here is going to be calcium, resulting into poor cell wall development. That is the reverse function, causing a plant modification, which is going to be the weak stems. So implying that when we go back here to the scenario, sure. So implying that when we go back here, so we've said the rotten roots. So the rotten roots are going to be due to lack of oxygen, and the reverse function is going to, the stunted growth is going to be lack of nitrogen, and the reverse function is going to be poor formation. Then for the weak stems, the deficient nutrient is going to be calcium or magnesium, and the reverse function is going to be poor cell wall development. And then for yellow leaves, the deficient nutrient is going to be nitrogen or magnesium, and the reverse function is going to be chlorophyll formation. So that's how we could construct the responses for and that means 4 responses are expected out of the scenario. So from effect. So implying that we need to find out the adaptive structures here, such as the narrow lamina, the hair lamina, folding the leaves during the day, and then straightening them during the night. So meaning that when we are explaining, we should explain how the narrow lamina, how the hair lamina, how their leaves folding during the day, and how straightening during the night will enable them to survive and produce some yields. So since they are to produce some yields, there should be an aspect of photosynthesis and an aspect of maybe growth, because that's the only way they'll manage to produce some yields. So implying that if I say the narrow lamina reduce the surface area over which water was lost by transpiration, conserving water for photosynthesis and growth. So there I'm explaining how the narrow lamina is going to enable them, one, to survive the condition of the dry spell, but in turn be able to produce some yields. That is when they conserve water for photosynthesis and growth. So meaning any explanation you're going to give, you have to link it to that. Okay. I'll pick two hands before we go to the second item. Okay, no, Francis, you can unmute. Okay, no, Francis, your hand is up. You can unmute and ask your question. Garden High, unmute and ask. I don't know what is happening. People, you're putting up your hands and you're not unmuting to ask. Please, you can unmute and ask your question because I need only two and then we go to the next thing. Okay, because of time, I think let us proceed to the second item. That's item 2. And for item 2, we are having our understanding part, having the hormonal disorders. And in this case, the hormonal disorders, we usually have 3. So that is diabetes, osteoporosis, as well as, someone is asking? Someone from Butongota, can you mute? Okay, so as I was saying, yes.
No, sir, we are not with the solutions of part B. We would like that you repeat for us.
Okay. So for part B, we've said that here you're going to give the adaptive structures and how they help them to survive. But on top of surviving the dry spell, you should also add how they are able to produce some yields. Now, surviving will mean how do they overcome excessive transpiration basing on the structures given, the scenario, and then how to produce some yields. Then you'll have to link that to photosynthesis and growth. So for instance, I've given an example that when I talk of the narrow lamina, it reduces the surface area over which water is lost through transpiration or by transpiration, conserving water for photosynthesis and growth. So decreasing the surface area over which transpiration occurs, that helps them to survive within the dry spell. But in turn, they will conserve water, which they will use for photosynthesis and growth. So that enables them to produce some yields. So meaning that when you're giving your response, you need to link it to those two. Surviving in the dry spell, that is overcoming excessive transpiration, as well as being able to produce some yields, meaning they are able to carry out photosynthesis as well as growth. People of Trinity College, I don't know whether I've responded to your question. You can unmute. People of Trinity College, you can unmute. Have I responded to your question?
No, sir, we would like to know how can you explain like that point of hair lamina, how can it affect or how can it bring good yields?
Okay. So for the hair lamina, it is going to trap a layer of water vapor over the leaves, increasing humidity around the leaves, reducing the rate of transpiration, and in turn, conserving water for photosynthesis and growth. So the hair lamina is just to trap a hair column or a moisture column or a layer of moisture around the leaves. So this increases the humidity around the leaves, and in turn, it will reduce the rate of transpiration. So enabling the plants to conserve water for photosynthesis and growth. Unmute, unmute. First unmute. Edgar. Oh, first unmute. Geoffrey, first unmute. I'm not hearing what you're saying. Yes. Power in Christ, you are muted. I can't hear you. Yes.
Now we are requesting that you repeat for us part A.
Part?
Part A.
Part A.
Yeah.
So for part A, we said you're going to look at the symptoms you have, identify the nutrient that is deficient. So we said for rotten roots, the deficient nutrient is oxygen, and the reversive function is going to be poor respiration. For stunted growth, the nutrient deficient is going to be nitrogen. The reverse function is going to be poor protein formation. For weak stems, the nutrient deficient is going to be so the nutrient is going to be calcium or magnesium, and the reverse function is going to be poor cell wall development. And then for the yellow leaves, the nutrient is going to be either magnesium or nitrogen, you choose one. And the reverse function is going to be poor chlorophyll formation. Okay, because of time, you're going to allow me and I go to the second item. So we're saying for the second item, we have 3 hormonal disorders, that is diabetes, osteoporosis, and goiter. Okay. So when we are constructing our response here, So are we seeing the screen? Anyone to unmute and you let me know whether you're seeing the screen. Okay, so when it comes to the hormonal disorders, so when we are constructing our response, you're going to look at a person. Now, when you tell a person, that is someone's name that will be mentioned in the scenario. For example, here we have John. And then you look at the scenario and identify the symptoms given in the scenario that they are the ones that will lead you to the hormonal disorder. For example, if we have frequent fractures, if we have joint pain and so on, so that can point to us on osteoporosis. If you have frequent urination, if you have fatigue, brain fog, and others, they can point to diabetes. And then if you have swelling of the neck, then that later. So meaning the scenario will guide you on which hormonal disorder that they are pointing to. And your task is to know the nutrient or hormone that is deficient to cause a certain effect that results into the symptom. So causing the disorder. And we have an example here. So where you have John lacked calcium, which caused weak bones, resulting into frequent fractures, causing the osteoporosis. So in this case, the person in context is John. The nutrient which is being lacked is calcium, and the effect is going to be the weak bones. The symptom is going to be the frequent fractures, and the disorder is going to be osteoporosis. So meaning that within the scenario, the one thing you can capture is the frequent fractures. So then the others, the frequent fracture will guide you on the others. So then if let's say we had Michael lacked insulin, which caused maybe so Michael lacked insulin, which caused frequent urination, causing diabetes. So the scenario will guide you on the fact that this person is facing frequent urination or is commonly thirsty. So which will guide you to know that the disorder you're dealing with is diabetes. So then the second part is how the body is coordinated. Now, this one is more of a process, and you may not have time to write down whatever that I'm sharing on the screen. But this is just a sample on how you can insert your words within the scenario. So meaning when you're reading your work during your revision at school, so you need to identify what are the various stimuli that a person can encounter. For example, observing something, for example, seeing light rays coming from a fierce-looking dog. Maybe I touched a hot body. Maybe I heard a loud sound. Maybe I heard a gun sound. So the stimulus this time, for example, if I hear a gun sound from the gunshot. If I saw a fierce-looking dog, the stimulus here is going to be the light rays from a fierce-looking dog. So you need to be knowing, if I am to receive light rays from a fierce-looking dog, which of my body organs is capable of receiving such a stimuli? And you know that's the eye. So they are received by the eye. So they're going to be turned into an effect. So the effect, for example, here is going to be the image on the retina. If it is sound, it can be vibration. If I touch the hot body, it can be a heat sensation. So you can check within and see within the scenario what is given to you. So the effect is then converted into the impulses by the sensory receptors. Now I'll put the word sensory within quotes because there are some organs like the skin can have thermoreceptors. So the skin can have thermoreceptors, the eye can have photoreceptors, the ear can have auditory receptors. So the skin can have pain receptors. So those can be specific receptors. But to avoid commitment on error, you can just go for sensory receptors if you are not so sure of which exact receptors about. But there should be how the impulses are generated. So say the stimuli, so it depends on what the stimuli might be, which were received by the receptor organ. So the receptor organ is guided by the scenario, and then which turned into an effect. So the effect can be the image of the object. It can be the vibrations from the sound waves. It can be a heat sensation, a pain sensation. So depending on what the scenario is giving us. So then the impulses were carried by the sensory nerves. Now the sensory nerves, it's in quotes because we can have specific sensory nerves like optic nerves, auditory nerves. So depending on what the scenario is giving us, then we can substitute. But in some other cases, like now, for the pain, for the thermal, so you may not have specific sensory nerves and you just go for sensory nerves. So then to the central nervous system. Now in your revision, you need to identify what are cranial responses and what are spinal responses. So which responses come as a result of impulses being interpreted in the brain, those are the cranial responses, and which responses are interpreted by the spinal cord, those are the spinal impulses, so the spinal responses. So most of the reflex arc responses or the reflex actions are going to be interpreted in the, so they are going to be interpreted in the spinal cord. But now responses like the one for last year where you touched and then you blink, so those ones are going to be interpreted within the brain. So to avoid commitment to error, so if you're not sure where the impulses are supposed to go, then you use the central nervous system. So ensure to write the word central nervous system in full, not writing CNS. So they are taken there for interpretation. The impulses are sent to the effectors. Now we have two effectors, which are the adrenal gland and then the muscles. Now, we can only include the adrenal gland if within the scenario we have heartbeat rate increasing, breathing rate increasing, or maybe dilation of the pupils, or flightedness. So if you see any of those within the scenario, then there we can use the direction of impulses being sent to the adrenal gland. But if they are not there, then we focus on only the muscles for the response they are going to generate. So the response generated by the muscle is going to be talked about within the scenario. So either the person is going to run, maybe the person is going to pick up a stick and try to beat something. Maybe the person is going to jump. So the scenario will guide you on what the response is, what the person is going, how the person is going to. So implying that this is just a template or a structure for the response. Now the scenario can guide you on how to fill in those gaps, like the stimuli, the receptor organ, the sensory receptors, the sensory nerves, the effect, and so on. And then we can now look at the effects of drug abuse. So the effects of drug abuse. So we may not have time to write all of them, but what I wanted you to figure out is when they ask you about the effects of drug abuse can be in different forms. So meaning the scenario still will guide you about which drug is being abused. So when you say, for example, mental illness due to brain damage caused by toxins in the drug. Now here, if they're talking about, let's say, alcohol, the person drinks alcohol, then you say in the alcohol. If they say the person smokes marijuana, then you say in the marijuana. They say the person maybe sniffs petrol, then you say in the petrol. So where I put the word drug, you have to substitute with the drug, which can only be directed by the scenario. So you need to read through the scenario will guide you on which drug is being abused here. And then as you construct in your responses, you give that. However, there are some responses. For example, when it comes to alcohol, you can't use the respiratory failure due to lung damage caused by toxins in alcohol, because alcohol may not have any effect directly on the lungs. But anything which is smoked, which is sniffed, then can have effect on the lungs, can have effects on the liver, can have effects on the brain, can have effects on the kidney, because all those ones, the toxins will interact with them. So there we are free to use it. Then imprisonment due to increased crime. So that one can be cutting across. Domestic violence, that is only if it is about adults that might be married. But if it is about youths, maybe young boys, school-going children, then such a response may not be convenient. Then malnutrition of the family, that is also for maybe elder people who are having families. But if they don't, and you are talking about youths, you are talking about school-going children, then that response also can't be used. School dropout of the children. So that one depends on how you twist it. But if you're talking of spending money for school fees on buying drugs, then that one also doesn't apply for the that one doesn't apply for the young ones, the school-going ones, and then the youths. Then others can cut across whether it's youth or elders. So that is for the understanding part as far as drug abuse is concerned. Then still on the understanding part, we have the eye defects. And for eye defects, the response is simple. You choose the person as guided by the scenario. So that person has or had an eye defect, and the eye defect is caused by a reason plus a certain effect. And we have an example down there. So for example, we have Mark has long-sightedness caused by too short or small. Now, when you are giving your response in the exam, first do not stroke, choose one of the two. Either use short or use small. Eyeball, making the distance between the cornea and the retina short. And the eye lens being so thin, reducing the refraction of the light. So now those are the causes of the eye defect, which is long-sightedness. So what is the effect of this? So resulting into light from near objects being focused behind the retina. So you need to have the cause of the defect. That is the reason for the cause, for the defect, and then the effect. So in this case, we have the cause, the reasons as too short or small eyeball. How is that a problem? It makes the distance between the cornea and the retina short. Then the lens being so thin, how is that a problem? Reducing the refraction of the light, resulting into, so that is now the effect. So the light from the near objects being focused behind retina. So that is if you're responding to eye defects. So the major eye defects we have, that is long-sightedness and short-sightedness. But as you are reading, you can also read about astigmatism. So as the eye defects. So that is for the understanding part for item 2. And then now we can look at the item 3. Now, majority of these things, you have them in your notes. So that's why I'm moving fast. But you just need to understand how the responses are structured so that when you're reading your work, as you're preparing for your mocks, so you can know how you're going to construct your responses. So for the application part, when you have a hormonal disorder and you have to generate solutions to it, you need to ensure that your solutions are well explained. For example, taking regular insulin injections. So the word regular carries the highest weight, because if the insulin injections are not taken regularly, then the solution may not be effective. So you should be taking regular insulin injections, but only that is not enough, because you need to explain your application. So how important is taking regular insulin injections? That is to increase insulin levels in blood to regulate the blood sugar. So doing regular exercise to consume excess blood glucose in respiration. So that is if you are looking at insulin, looking at diabetes. You can also have doing regular exercise to improve responsiveness of cells to insulin, regulating blood sugar. That is still for diabetes. But if it is osteoporosis, you can do doing regular exercise to improve calcium or vitamin D absorption into bones, increasing bone strength. So that is now when you're talking of osteoporosis. So meaning implying, depending on which problem you are solving, so you can now look at how you play around with these solutions. So reducing sugar intake to prevent irregular changes in blood sugar levels. So that you'll be solving diabetes. Increasing water intake to replace the water lost in urination or to quench the thirst. So this is for diabetes, but there should be mentioning of the frequent urination or the thirst within the scenario. So if it's not mentioned, then this response is not applicable. So there are others there you can check through. So eating food rich in iodine, such as iodinized salt, to prevent swelling or enlargement of the thyroid gland. That is if in case we are solving goiter. Then carrying out surgery on the lumps in the neck to remove the lumps. So that is still for goiter. Then there are these two, for them they cut across for any, going for guidance and counseling to learn how to manage his or her. So that means within the scenario, they'll guide you whether you're talking of a man or a woman. So you choose, so his or her condition. But you should mention the condition, because the scenario would have guided you which condition you are talking about. Seeking for treatment to overcome other diseases. So you can add seeking for early treatment or seeking for treatment, and this will intend to overcome other diseases. So implying that, as you mentioned, so you can also cross-check with the work you have in the notes, and if the explanation was not added, then you can add your explanation so that as you are reading, you have your points when they are well standing. Then from there, solutions to effects of drug abuse. So going for rehabilitation. So what is the importance of that? To stop or quit drug abuse. Keep in mind what I told you, that when we talk of drug abuse, the scenario will guide you on what the drug abuse is. Is it alcohol taking? Is it smoking? Is it taking addictive pills? So on. So you substitute for the drug abuse, so than keeping it general. So seeking guidance and counseling, ensure that you have the correct spelling of the word counseling. Because if you have the wrong spelling, then the point doesn't count. So seeking guidance and counseling to get advice on the effects of the drug on their body. Keep in mind what I said, that the drug we're talking about here will be guided by the scenario. So avoiding going to areas where drugs are sold from to prevent being tempted. Still, the scenario will guide you on the drug which they will be talking about. So going for physical exercise in this time to improve their body health. Engaging in hobbies such as those ones mentioned there, among others, to prevent being bored, that would engage them, so that would So I think this was supposed to be that would make them engage in drug abuse. So you can modify that. But I'm very convinced that you have this as your notes in the books. But the only thing you need to add are the explanations, because you may have them listed: avoiding spending time with bad peer groups, avoiding going to areas where drugs are sold. So you need to add the explanations to them. So in case you don't have them in the notes, but if you have, then you're good to go. And maybe other areas of concern when it comes to item 2 is you need to read about the hearing process, the seeing process, and then the movement process. That is locomotion and then coordination. Humans. Okay, I'm going to pick 2 hands. I'm seeing Noah Sandy. You can unmute. Noah Sandy. Noah Sandy is not ready. Chibukeses, you can unmute and ask. People are raising up hands here. Can you unmute and ask? Noah Sandy, can you unmute and ask? Anyone else who wants to ask a question, please unmute and ask, and so that we can continue. Okay, so then since there's no one asking, so solutions to eye defects. So here by using glasses containing, so we are responding to the same eye defect we had there, which was long-sightedness. So by using glasses containing a convex or converging lens that converges light rays from a near object, allowing the light to be converged onto the retina. So that would be the solution for a person who was having long-sightedness. So meaning if the person had short-sightedness, you just need to reverse those responses. So where we're having convex or converging, then we shall have concave or diverging. So where we have converges light, then we shall have diverges light. And then where we have near object, then it will be far object. Okay. So we can have a scenario here. So anyone who'd like to read? So anyone who'd like to read? Okay. I'm seeing very many people here. You're raising up your hands, but you are not unmuting to ask questions. Please, if we don't have questions, let us put the hands down so that we can continue. Okay, now when you look at the scenario here, you're given that Alan has been drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes. So that means here the drug abuse we're talking about is drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes. So then you're told that she often complains of fatigue, frequent urination, and a lot of thirst. So here they are giving us symptoms which will direct us to disorder. So then they are saying one day as she was boiling milk, she stepped on a hot saucepan and jumped away, kicking the saucepan away. So you realize that now here she stepped on the hot saucepan. So this will be our stimulus. So which will be the heat from the hot saucepan. And then that means we're going to be talking about the thermal receptors in the skin. So we shall talk of the effect as the heat sensation. And then it is the one that will be converted into impulses. Then she was rushed to the hospital and was informed that she has a hormonal disorder. So implying that here now we've identified that our hormonal disorder, according to the symptoms we have, is going to be diabetes. Now, when you check, they're asking you what are the likely effects associated with the lifestyle lived by Allen and her friends. So implying that now you're going to go back and look at the effects which we discussed there, and you choose which ones are compatible for alcohol and then smoking cigarettes. So don't limit yourself, write as many as you can, as long as you manage to be within the time anticipated. So then they ask you, describe how Allen's body was coordinated and made her kick away the hot saucepan. So that now goes back to that second area, which we covered. So you can read through, and we've now identified what our stimuli is, what our receptor organ will be, that is the skin, what our effect will be, which is the heat sensation, what our sensory receptors will be, those are the thermal receptors, so they're the ones which will convert the sensation, the heat sensation into impulses, then which will be carried by the sensory neurons, and the process will continue as we discussed up there. So then what should be done by Allen to overcome her hormonal disorder? So meaning here we don't give solutions for the likely effects associated with the drug abuse, but we only give solutions associated with diabetes and strictly diabetes. So as I've said, you're going to respond to the space given to you. So give as many as you can, as long as you ensure you are within the time range of the paper. Okay, so that is for item 2. Time has gone and we need now to move a bit faster. Now, when it comes to item 3, so the understanding part, we can have the likely effects of missing antenatal care. These are things you already have in notes, so we may not have much time to write them down, but you can just take a look and write 2 or 3 so that you can know how the response can be constructed. So likely effects of missing antenatal care. So how will you know that you need these responses? It will be mentioned within the scenario that maybe this lady of a given name, during her time when she was pregnant, she missed antenatal care or didn't go for antenatal care or chose not to go for antenatal care. So that's when you will know that you need to bring in such responses if they ask you to explain the likely effects of her behavior or lifestyle. So then the likely effects of aborting. So the second one here will be the likely effects of abortion. And Even this one will be mentioned within the scenario. Either they will let you know that maybe someone advised this person to abort, or the person thought of aborting, or maybe the person aborted, and then they ask you what are the likely results the likely effects the person may face. So implying that still that will be guided by the scenario. So the moment it's not mentioned in the scenario, then you don't need to talk about it. But if it is mentioned somewhere in the scenario and they ask you the likely effects of abortion, then you can take a read through. So still, these are things you have in the notes. So you can take a look and see whether they correlate with what you have in the notes, and then where possible, you will need to modify your free time. So for example, aborting may result in damage of the uterus. So what would be that, resulting into failure to have children and pregnant again? Okay, so that is the second area, likely effects of abortion. So the third, likely effects of teenage pregnancy. So even this one will be mentioned in the scenario. They may not necessarily mention teenage pregnancy, but they can give you the age of the child, let's say a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 12-year-old, something like that. And then they lead you to that 12-year-old getting pregnant, which will imply that that person is having teenage pregnancy. So implying that if they ask you the likely effects of her lifestyle or anything of that case, then you need to bring in the likely effects of teenage pregnancy. Okay. So you can check here still, as I've said, these are points which you already have in notes. So you can just look through and you see whether they correlate with what you've been having in notes. Okay. So likely effects associated with HIV positive status. So maybe still even this one will be mentioned that maybe after checking, the person was found to be HIV positive. So if they ask you what are the likely effects associated with the recent findings from the laboratory or status of the person, so those are the likely effects, which is something also we have in the notes. Reduced immunity due to destruction of white blood cells by the virus, increased stigma due to social anxiety about how the infection is contracted, so and so on and so forth. So implying that whatever we're talking about here is going to be guided by the scenario. So you read through the scenario, identify what the scenario is mentioning, and then it will guide you on what you are expecting to write. Then when it comes to the application part, I'm going to come back to those who are raising up hands, but for the meantime, I wanted us to finish session. Okay? So how to overcome challenges associated with HIV positive individuals. So if already it's mentioned that the person is HIV positive, so when you're giving some of your solutions, you need to really bring out clear explanation. If you're advising a person who is infected to prevent, to abstain from sexual intercourse, then the intention is one, to avoid exchange of infected sexual fluids, but this will be important to prevent reinfections because this person is already infected and maybe can be infected by other HIV strains or maybe other sexually transmitted viruses like hepatitis B and so on and so forth. So to prevent reinfection, this person is encouraged to abstain from sexual intercourse to prevent or to avoid exchange of infected sexual fluids. Now, it is very important to add the words infected because if they are not, then there will be no problem. So then if a person is not HIV positive and is HIV negative, that means when you talk of abstinence from sexual intercourse, for him or her, it will be to avoid exchange of infected sexual fluids. So that one won't be reinfected because it's HIV negative, meaning you'll be preventing being infected. So taking regular antiretrovirus medication to reduce the viral load. The word regular is carrying a lot of weight. Without it, if the ARVs are taken irregularly, then they may not work. So this word for it can be abbreviated. You can be allowed to abbreviate it as ARV medication, but to avoid contentions, it's much better you write the full word. So avoid sharing sharp objects to prevent exchange of infected blood to avoid reinfection. That is for a person who in the scenario is being talked about being HIV positive. But if the person is, you are advising maybe the youths, maybe the community, then you can just say avoid sharing sharp objects to prevent exchange of infected blood. Screening blood before transfusion will also be important to prevent exchange of infected blood. Yeah. Eating a balanced diet to boost immunity, seeking early treatment for other infections to avoid more immunity reduction, and so on and so forth. So you can check through the work you have in the books and ensure that they correlate with the standards required. So how to overcome the effects of genetic disorders. This is also work that we have in the books. So we can talk of counseling from professionals to get advice on how to take care of the sick baby or the sick person, taking their sick child to the hospital to get treatment for the sick child to prevent any further infections, taking their baby for vaccination, right? Each with a boost in its immunity, giving their children a balanced diet. So all these, you already have them in the books. So you just need to ensure that they are explained, not just saying taking their baby for vaccination, taking their sick child to the hospital to get treatment, giving their child a balanced diet, and so on and so forth. So you need to attach an explanation. If you're talking of, let's say, sickle cell anemia and hemophilia, if you take the child for blood transfusion, how important is that to maintain a good blood level in the blood? So here the points, you already have them, but the important thing is to ensure that you have the explanations. So if I'm carrying out vaccination for this baby, how is that important to provide it with a boost in its immunity? Taking the child who is sickle cell anemic or who is hemophilia for blood transfusion regularly, how important is that to maintain a good blood level in the body? So not just listing the solutions and then you leave them unexplained, because that will call for loss of scores drastically. Just continuing for specific disorders like hemophilia, then the one for albinism. So these ones you can read through within the work you have. My intention here was to ensure that you get to know how to construct, explain the responses, explain the applications, than just listing a number of them, and then you end up getting very low scores. So other areas we may need to be concerned of, those are the genetic crosses for plant genetics, including selfing, genetic disorders such as sickle cell anemia, sex-linked traits, and then sex determination, blood group inheritance. Then you need to read about the menstrual cycle in humans and then processes from fertilization to birth. And then maybe the very important thing here, when you're writing your late statements for genetic symbols, please avoid saying let the allele for, let's say, red petal petals be capital R, because the allele can never be a letter, but it can be represented by a letter. So our late statement should be a certain letter, a capital letter, represent the allele for a dominant trait. And then the small letter represent allele for a recessive trait. And now these ones are all guided by the scenario. So meaning as you're reading through the the genetic work you've done in class, ensure that you can clearly understand which one is the dominant trait, which one is the recessive trait. Then also avoid giving the allele for a genotype. For example, the allele for red plants, or the allele for red flowered plants, the allele for white flowered plants, because now that is a phenotype instead of the characteristic. So the characteristic in the red flowered plants is going to be, let's say, the red petal color, maybe the white petal color, the length of the tall length of the plant, short length, something like that. So try to extract out the characteristic, not giving the phenotype of the organism. Because a single allele does not qualify to be used for the entire phenotype, because the phenotype should be controlled by a pair of alleles. So here the allele is representing a form of the gene that controls a certain characteristic, not a phenotype. So until when the two alleles are joined together, that's when they'll control a phenotype. So ensure that your late statements are very clear. Then two, ensure that you can use letters which you can clearly write a capital letter and a small letter. So avoid using letters like C when you cannot separate S, L, among others. So choose letters where you can clearly write the capital letter and the small letter distinctively, where there is no confusion. Okay. So we have a scenario there, but I wanted to, if you really have a question, please unmute and ask the question before we go through the scenario. Anyone with a question? Anyone with a question, please unmute and ask. Otherwise, time has gone. Okay, let me first continue, then I'll get back to those having questions, maybe the last 10 or 5 minutes. So you're given a scenario here where you have an NGO, it is in Malaba district and has been tasked by the government to take up the following mandates. So among these mandates, we have developing cockroaches to be used in testing a new insecticide on markets, and then sensitizing the public about the prevention of HIV/AIDS and how to take care of those that are HIV positive. So in the process of addressing their first mandate, which is the developing of cockroaches, they crossed pure breeds of long-winged cockroaches with those of short-winged cockroaches. But to their surprise, all the cockroaches produced had short wings. I think that was supposed to be had. So this has prolonged their research, and the task we have here is to explain the science behind the product of their breeding during their research. And the product of their breeding was the short-winged cockroaches. So what we see here is you are crossing pure breeds and crossing pure breeds of long-winged cockroaches and pure breeds of short-winged cockroaches. Okay. Can we have questions? Because I'm seeing people as if they want to ask something. I'll continue. Can you unmute and ask if you have a question? Yes, Noah. Noah Sandy. Noah Sandy. Okay. Pandrombo. Please ask a question. Don't be shy. Okay.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm fine. We are not getting here overrushing. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, because the time has not on our side, but maybe where did you lag so that I can go back to around there?
Okay.
Where can we start from? Where you lagged?
Okay, like around ways of overcoming the effects of HIV. Yeah.
Okay, for this area, what I will request, when I share, just try to look through the points, not to write them down all, because we already have these things in the book. So what I wanted is to look at the structure and relate with what we have in the book. So I'm going to go back slightly to that area.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, sir.
One other person, one last person? Okay. You can mute. Yes, Gab. So who is asking? Anyone asking from Gab? What? Okay. Okay. I think this is the area where people were asking, just like I've said. So the best way how we're going to save time is because you already have these things in the books, you've studied them. So my intention here is for you to understand so that you can check through the work that you have to ensure that your points you have in the books, they are not just listed like abstinence from sexual intercourse, use of condoms during sexual intercourse, avoiding sharing sharp objects. So they need to have explanations. And then there are some other key words that really take weight. For example, taking regular antiretroviral medication. So the word regular takes a lot of weight. But when you have it and you don't have the explanation that to reduce the viral load, then it may still lose its weight. So meaning ensure that the points you have in the book, they are really explained. And I was also explaining about the point of, for example, for a person who is HIV negative, then it is being infected. But if the person is already HIV positive, then it is to avoid exchange of infected sexual fluids to prevent reinfections. So that is very important. So you need to read the scenario and understand. the person you're advising is the person HIV positive or HIV negative, because it will determine how you end your point when you're talking about, let's say, use of condoms, avoiding sharing sharp objects, and so on and so forth. Okay. So then this was just more of the points, but as I've explained, we already have these points. So just check and take note of the points. So ensure that the ones you have in the book, they really correlate what is expected. So allow me go back here to the scenario, because our time is getting done. We are left with 7 minutes, yet we had 2 other items to do. So meaning here, as I had said, you're going to look at the scenario and you realize that our dominant allele here is going to be the allele for short wing length. And then recessive will be the allele for long wing length. So I'll leave that behind so that you can try it at school. Then the message that you would give for their second mandate. So you are advising people, those who are HIV negative for prevention, and those who are HIV positive on how to take care of themselves. So that will be the response for part B, which is content that we really have in our books. Okay, so that is section A. So allow me go to section B, part 1. So where we usually have the effect of human activities on the environment. And in this case, our approach is going to be basically that if that activity, which will be mentioned within the scenario, caused the problem, which might or might not be said in the scenario. And then, since of course, the effect of the activity. For example, so if in the scenario they've talked about deforestation, so deforestation caused the soil infertility. So the soil infertility may be mentioned in the scenario or not, but as long as deforestation is mentioned, I can use it. Since it left soil bare, exposed to the erosion agents. I think this was supposed to be exposing. So exposing it to the erosion agents. So implying that our activity here is deforestation. So the problem here is soil infertility, and the effect is that it left the soil bare, exposed to the erosion agents. So meaning you need to read through the scenario, identify the activities given to you, find the problems they might bring about, and then look at what would be the effect of those activities in line with the problem. So what you need to note here, that we have 2 types of scenarios. There are those which are open and those which are closed. So when we talk of open scenarios in this area, so here you're going to be given a scenario, but no problem will be stated within the scenario. And in such a case, you'll find a statement, for example, the activities caused many problems, or caused different problems, or are likely to cause different problems, and so on. So here, no specific problems are given. So for you, look at the activities and you attach your own problems and explain the effects of those activities in line with the problem. Then for the closed scenario, so it's the one where the problems are going to be stated in the scenario. For example, his activities caused the flooding, landslides, animal attacks, and poor yields. So meaning whatever you explain, your activities should be linked to flooding, your activities should be linked to landslides, your activities should be linked to animal attacks, and your activities should be linked to poor yields. So nothing outside that. So if I have, let's say, if I have use of fertilizers So when I'm given use of fertilizers, my explanation should be linked to one of these activities, for example, poor yields. If I have overstocking, so I make sure that overstocking is going to be linked to one of these activities, let's say flooding. If I have, let's say, deforestation, charcoal burning, so I find a way of linking them to the problems which are stated within the scenario. So if you bring in any problem which is outside the scenario, then it won't score a point. So in terms of application, so here you can propose solutions to the problems. And here you have the activity plus the effect plus the preventing of the problem. So give an example. So if I'm carrying out afforestation, then how important is that? Conserves trees, that is the effect. So reducing the speed of running water. So which problem is that solving? Preventing soil erosion. So it can also be used for preventing soil fertility. So implying that every time you're giving your solution, you should identify which activity am I doing and how is it important. So if I carry out afforestation, it's conserving trees. If I carry out bush fallowing, it is conserving bushes. If I use natural fertilizers, so for them, they are conserving the living organisms in the soil. So and so on and so forth. Then why we conserve the environment? In this case, the response approach, we're going to have the resource you are conserving plus its use. Take an example, trees provide habitat to animals. So the resource we are conserving is the trees, and then the use is going to be to provide the habitat to the animals. So implying that you look through the scenario and identify what are the resources talked about. And then you start now attaching the uses. As I told you earlier, write as many as you can, as long as you're within the time. So don't limit yourself, but instead write to ensure that you can have a number of responses given, unless if you are limited. But if you're not limited, write as many as you can, but keep in mind you need to be within the time frame. So when you're giving the responses for the why we conserve the environment, so avoid non-friendly conservation reasons, such as soil is used for agriculture. Because if agriculture is extensive, then it can lead to soil exhaustion. So instead you can say, soil provides nutrients for plants. So that is still in line with agriculture, but it's more of an environmental friendly conservation way. Trees provide firewood or timber. Now, keep in mind, when you cut the trees for firewood, then you won't have them giving. Yet trees provide food, meaning I can get fruits from one tree and then they can produce more fruits and more fruits and more fruits. So trees providing food becomes an eco-friendly use than you using the trees for you to get timber, for you to get firewood, for you to get charcoal, and so on. So water bodies are used for fishing or sand mining. So you need to regulate such responses, but maybe water bodies are a source of food, such as fish. Water bodies are a habitat to organisms, and so on and so forth. So other areas you need to be concerned about are the ecological concepts, such as a food chain and then the food web. So in your free time, as you are reading, pay attention also to the food chain and the food web. So still under this area, you need to be having knowledge about the insects, wetlands, among others, as you've covered under ecology. So here we want to understand what is the difference between a closed scenario and the open scenario. So we have a scenario there, and I would wish if someone would would unmute and tell me if you read through the scenario, which type of scenario do you think it is? Is it open or is it closed? So anyone who can unmute and then you let me know what you think. Anyone can unmute? Anyone there who can let us know if you read through the scenario? I'm seeing Padrom Seed and some 21 others raising up their hands. Can you please unmute and respond? Anyone there? Okay. So because of time, I don't know. So you are in this one, you are given that instances of strong wind, mudslides, flooding of gardens in the valleys have become common in the area. So when you look at that, they are giving you the specific problems that are within the area. So implying that when you read here, the activities we have include timber cutting, charcoal burning, rearing of cattle, and crop gardening. So the farmer also practices bush burning in preparation for planting and also dig up and down the slope. So all those activities you see there, you should link any of them to strong wind, to mudslide, and flooding. So if you bring in any activity, for example, if you link this to soil infertility or soil erosion, so whatever you'll be talking about will not score. For example, if you talk of, let's say, rearing of cattle, bush burning, resulting into production of a lot of heat, which will destroy the soil living organisms, reducing soil aeration, resulting into soil infertility. So if the problem you're linking for is soil infertility, and within the problems talked about here, it's not, then such a point or response will not score anything. Because anything, for example, if I'm looking at strong winds, so when I cut timber, you cut trees. So that one can be linked to strong winds because of removal of windbreaks. Charcoal burning involves cutting trees, which removes windbreaks, so that can be linked to strong winds. So you choose which one you're going to link to that. Then rearing cattle compacts soil. So this reduces soil drainage, and that can bring about flooding. So bush burning can weaken the soil structure, which can bring about mudslides. Digging up and down the slope can accelerate washing away of soil, which can lead to mudslide. So you can look at the various activities, ensure you link them to one of these three problems. Now, it's much better that you write a point on each of the items. So on each of the activity you see there, that here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 activities. So meaning you generate about 6 items, but each of the 6 items should be linked to either strong wind, mudslide, or flooding. So you can find that some may cut across the 3 areas, but you choose. If you are linking timber cutting to strong wind, then you can link charcoal burning to maybe mudslide, and then you can link the rearing of cattle to flooding. But again, bush burning can be linked back to mudslide, and so on and so forth. So then you check here, they're asking you how they can overcome the challenges. So that means now here they are asking you the solutions for the challenges. And the challenges we have here is strong wind, mudslides, and flooding, meaning your responses should be overcoming those 3 challenges. So if you bring in any challenge which is outside those 3, still that solution will not count. So you should ensure that whichever the solution you're giving is solving strong wind, solving mudslide, solving flooding. Anything outside that, it's not part of the score. So that's what happens with the ROSD scenario. Then when it comes to this, we have somehow a longer one. So you are told of the site on the freshwater lake. Below are some of the issues highlighted in the report. So many factories established along the shores of the lake release untreated effluent directly into the lake. There were no latrines at the busy landing site. Fishermen use indiscriminate fish nets to catch fish. I think it was supposed to be the surrounding swamp has been taken over by real estate dealers and have raised residential apartments. Then furthermore, they are saying the above challenges are believed to cause, I think this was supposed to be the above activities are believed to cause serious harm to the environment and the human population. The above activities are believed to cause serious harm to the environment and the human population. So you can see here, so they've left it open to you, but that means that here we have the many factories, that is one activity. There were no latrines, that is the second. Fishermen use indiscriminate fish netting, that is the third. And then real estate dealers raising residential apartments in the swamp, that is the fourth. So we have 4 activities here, and at least you should attach a problem to each. So explain how the highlighted activities on the land site will affect the environment and the human population. So each activity should be linked to a certain problem. Suggest why it is important to conserve such an ecosystem. So go back here and look at the ecosystem. Select. So we have the swamp, and mainly those are the ones that we shall be having. But within the swamp, you can find that you have other vegetations like maybe pillars, trees, and so on. So within the swamp. So, but at least you can concentrate on the lake, the swamp as your resources that you have to talk about. Now, the question is, which one is better? To do a closed or an open scenario? So none of them is better because each of them can lead you to success or failure. So meaning you read the scenario, understand it, look at the one where you can link the activities to certain problems. So such that you don't spot out. So before that, that is item 4 and 5 or part 1 or section B. And unless if someone is having a question, you can unmute and ask the question. So anyone having a question? Tomorrow, secondary school. Gab, you have a question? Tomorrow secondary, you can ask your question. Can hear you. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, you can ask your question.
Sir, good evening.
Yes, good evening. How are you?
I'm fine. Sir, I was asking the other part of not condition, the other part of where you talk about drug abuse. I heard you have said that when you're giving your responses, you're supposed to give in line with the according to the you're supposed to give answers according to the other one. You talk about frequent urination, not in line with the drug abuse. Sir, I would like
I think what I was saying there.
Elaborate. Sir,
I think you can stay on. Don't mute.
Elaborate.
Don't mute. Okay. So what I was saying there is that you should look at the scenario. The scenario is going to guide you on which kind of drugs are abused. So the scenario I gave you there was having alcohol and smoking cigarettes. So that means whatever you're going to do, where you are talking about drug abuse, you should be only in line with those. If they talked about, let's say, sniffing petrol, taking addictive pills, then that means still your response should also be in line with taking addictive pills and then maybe sniffing petrol. So that's how the scenario is going to guide you on which type of drug abuse is happening. I don't know whether that responds to you.
Which means that if you're giving your responses, like when they ask about the likely effects he faced, you're supposed to, like when they are talking about when all two drugs are abused, you're supposed to answer it all.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. One last one. You can mute. One last one of those who are raising up your hands. One last one of those who are raising up hands. Alternatively, then, if there is no one, then you can continue. Okay, so we are back here. So we go to item . So we want to go to part 2 so that we can finalize with this. Okay. So now this is the last part of the paper. So it's usually part 2 of section B. It's having items 6 and 7. And our first part for the understanding part is how food is used to provide energy for exercise or doing any work. So I use exercise here, but it can be doing any other work which may not necessarily be exercise. But as long as it's about food providing energy. So when you are providing your response, you need to have within your response the process of digestion of food. You need to describe how that food is going to be absorbed into the bloodstream. Then you'll explain the transportation. So you'll describe the transportation of the food to the area where it will be needed. And then finally, you will describe the use of the food in respiration. So for that case, you need to be sensitive with what is given. If the question doesn't talk about maybe cooking oil, maybe anything which is fatty, then it implies that you should not include lipid digestion. If there is nothing talking about protein digestion, then, okay, if there is no source of proteins in the scenario, then you should not talk about protein digestion. So implying that you need to look at the scenario, understand the different type of food given, and then you'll be able to know which type of digestion am I going to talk about. So in this case, you're going to go look at your work and then look at the process. Keep in mind, every time you're talking about a process in biology, the scoring will stop where your process stops being logically flowing. So if I'm talking about, let's say, digestion of starch, then I say starch is broken down into or is hydrolyzed into maltose, catalyzed by maltase, catalyzed by salivary amylase produced by the salivary gland. Then I say the maltose is broken down into glucose, catalyzed by maltase produced by the gastric gland. And you realize that the maltase is not produced in the gastric gland. Or let us say catalyzed by the maltase produced by the pancreas. And you realize that it's not the pancreas that produces maltase. However much that is true, maltase catalyzes the hydrolysis of maltose to glucose, that whatever that will come after that point will be wrong because of the organ that is producing that maltase. So meaning you need to go sit down, read the process and understand it. So understand the process of absorption. So you may not go into the much details of the villi and so on, but if you have glucose and amino acid, how are they absorbed into the bloodstream? If you have fatty acids and glycerol, how are they absorbed into the lymphatic system and how will they be utilized? Then of course the transportation, if you have now the glucose in the bloodstream, how will the glucose reach the muscles, for example? So it will be carried by blood within the blood plasma to the muscles. So you may not explain the whole process of transport, but at least there should be the link from the ileum to the muscles, and that will be being carried by blood vessels within the blood plasma. So then once it reaches there, then we'll need to have the glucose being oxidized to carbon dioxide and water, generating energy through aerobic respiration in the muscles. So, and then of course the person will get the energy to do whatever the person is doing. So it can be running, it can be maybe carrying heavy loads and so on and so forth. So just know if anything requires use of energy and someone took some food, the processes food will pass through to generate that energy needed are those 4 processes. So the one which is the The hardest here is the process of digestion. So that one you need to sit down, look through your notes, ensure that you can sequentially write the process of digestion from the start to the completion where absorption will take place at the ileum. Then furthermore, we have nutrient deficiencies. This is work for senior 2, so which you need to revisit and check. So in this case, when we are constructing our response, within the scenario, you'll be given some symptoms, and then this symptom is caused by lack or excess of a certain nutrient, resulting into a reversible function. So for example, if I'm having frequent sicknesses, then this is caused by lack of proteins, resulting into low immunity. So another person can talk of lack of vitamin C, resulting into low immunity. So the importance of proteins in this case is to improve immunity or to boost immunity. So if it is reversed, then you have low immunity. So if I lack proteins, if I lack vitamin C, it will result into low immunity. But within the scenario, what will be given to you will be the frequent sickness. So meaning when you see the frequent sickness within the scenario, if you are to explain the likely causes, then that will be lack of proteins or lack of vitamins. If I see weak teeth, lack of vitamin D, or you can have lack of calcium. So if I see night blindness, then that will be lack of vitamin A. So try to go and look at the nutrients and their functions. So implying that as you are responding here, lack of that nutrient will result into a reversible function. So if I had the function of vitamin A being production of rod cells, that means I'll have poor formation of rod cells. That's why I'll have night blindness. So, and so on and so forth. So meaning here, takes time, read through your senior 2 work to ensure that you have the nutrients and their functions on your fingertips. So implying that you'll be able now to know that when they give me this symptom, then it is due to lack of this nutrient or excess of this nutrient, and then this is the reversible function. So we can't exhaust them now, but as you are reading, you just know that is the anticipated or the expected response approach that you need. Just like you can see in the example I've given you there. So in the scenario, they would have told me that you have frequent sickness. So when I'm explaining what might have brought about the frequent sickness, so the frequent sickness is caused by lack of proteins resulting into low immunity. So if in the scenario you are given certain food value, certain food stuff that the person has been feeding on, and you look at the foodstuffs and proteins are there. Let's say the person has been eating beans. Beans contain proteins, but this person is still frequently falling sick. So this implies that that person now, the nutrient to be lacking is likely vitamin C. But if this person feeds on fruits, for example, oranges, so meaning this person may have vitamin C. So the frequent sickness may be as a result of the proteins. So something like that. Then this was supposed to be the third one, how damage on body organs can affect normal functioning of the body. So here you just need to know damage of the body organ. So identify the body organ caused a reversible function. So if I have damage of the kidney, so this will cause poor urine formation. Now they may directly give you the effects, or they may give you the organs that were observed that they were damaged. So it's you to check and see what they have given you. Have they given you that this person is maybe producing very little urine after the damage, after the accident? That means the person's kidney is affected. So damage of the kidney caused the low urine formation. So is this person having difficulty in breathing? So then that means on the other side, I'll say damage of the lungs caused the difficulty in breathing. So they can give you the symptoms, or they can tell you that on assessment, the person was found to have damaged the kidney, lungs, and so on. So then they ask you how the accident affected the normal functioning of the body. So in that kind of sense, you look through the scenario will guide you whether they have given you the organs for you to find out the effect on normal functioning, or they've given you the effect on normal functioning to find out the organ that was affected. So implying that, go back to that senior one work and the subsequent work we've been reading to ensure that you look at the functions of organs, the functions of systems, and that will help you to understand the likely effects of those systems or organs being damaged, including cells like the red blood cells, white blood cells, and so on. So that is now the senior one work, which you now need to revisit and see how you can comprehend. So then the effects of poor lifestyle of the person. So here you'll be given a symptom and it's caused by a certain lifestyle due to the effect of that lifestyle. Take an example. If the person is having body weakness, and that is the symptom given to us, and this person has been known for smoking, so that is the lifestyle the person has been living. So implying that body weakness was caused by smoking due to the carbon dioxide in the smoke that binds to the hemoglobin strongly, preventing oxygen uptake into the blood. So in this case, our symptom, which will be given in the scenario, is body weakness. The lifestyle will also be given in the scenario as smoking. And then now our responsibility here is to look at how does smoking bring about body weakness. So that's where now we say, due to the carbon monoxide in the smoke that binds to hemoglobin strongly, preventing oxygen uptake into the blood. So if we don't have oxygen, of course, you won't have respiration. That's why now the body weakness will come in. So something like that, that is in case you have, this person has been sitting for long, drinking a lot of alcohol, taking a lot of junk, smoking. So those are all poor lifestyle for a certain person. So you just need to go and look into your work still under, for smoking, for example, it's under gaseous exchange. You can read through that work. Then you can look at the effects of alcohol under drug abuse. You can also look at nutritional disorders under nutrition, so such that we can come up with the responses. I could not exhaust them here, but this is work you already have in the books. So that's why I just decided to give you a structure which you can base on, so the next time you find such a scenario, so that you can know how to respond to it. So if I continue here, now we come to the application. So how the person managed to recover. So here you have the response caused by the recovery effects. So the responses are going to be mentioned within the scenario. For example, increased breathing rate, increased sweating, increased heartbeat rate, and so on. So you need to look at the scenario and you identify which one is the response. So if I have increased breathing rate, so this caused increased oxygen uptake for breaking down lactic acid to produce energy. So that energy, of course, will be now used for the person maybe to move home or to move to wherever he wants to move. So as an recovery effect. Increased the heartbeat rate caused the increased pumping of blood containing oxygen to muscles, breaking down lactic acid to produce energy. So even this one, it will be mentioned in the scenario. Now your response is to come up with the recovery effect. So how will it affect the recovery? So increased sweating caused the increased loss of heat, allowing the body to cool. So the increased sweating will be given in the scenario. So anything which is not mentioned in the scenario, please do not include it. And if the thing is mentioned in the scenario, then you can look into it. Okay. Then we have solutions to the nutrient deficiency, which we talked about there. Then here it's just a matter of having that person who is mentioned in the scenario should feed on food rich in the nutrient which was lacking, improving the function which was reversed, overcoming the symptom that was in the scenario. Take, for instance, initially we had within the scenario that this person has been suffering frequent fractures. That was in the scenario. And we said that means Jack lacked calcium, which resulted in low bone strength, which was now the one causing the frequent fractures. So in this time, what is our advice to Jack? So Jack should feed on food rich in calcium. If you know some examples, you can put them, but if you don't know, don't commit. So improving bone strength, that is now improving the function, overcoming the frequent fracture, which was the symptom that we checked from the scenario. So meaning what the scenario will provide us with will only be the frequent fracture. So the other one was frequent sickness, for example. So that means the person feeds on food rich in proteins, improving the person's immunity, overcoming frequent sickness. Or if you use vitamin C, let's say Mary should feed on food rich in vitamin C, improving her immunity, overcoming frequent sickness. So meaning that after understanding what are the various nutrients that we have, what are their functions, and what would be the symptoms if they are lacking, then we can dive into and then construct the responses as you can see there. So as I've said, there are very many, we can't exhaust them, but you already have these things in the book. So you just need to have the response structure, then go find a few scenarios and then try to insert the responses depending on the scenario. But keep in mind, all the guidance is going to come from one area, that is the scenario. So it's only the scenario that will guide you on what you need. So there are very many things, but you need to read the scenario and understand it. Otherwise, misinterpretation of the scenario can make you go astray and you lose scores drastically. So solutions to effects of poor lifestyle. So in our response structure, the person should plus the solution so as to overcome the symptom caused by the lifestyle. So what we mean here is, if the person talked about his Mark, so Mark should seek guidance and counseling. Now, that is the solution. But this solution should come with how important is it to become a solution. So Mark should seek guidance and counseling to get awareness on effects of smoking on his body. That is, if Mark was a smoker and was getting shortness in breath. So effects of smoking on his body, so as to overcome shortness in breath. So meaning in the scenario, they would have told us that Mark is experiencing shortness in breath. So caused by the smoking, meaning in the lifestyles they will give us, Mark should be a smoker. So implying that we are advising Mark to go and seek guidance and counseling. But how is this important? So that he gets aware on effects of smoking on his body. Now that is our complete solution. But what does this solve? Which symptom are we solving to overcome shortness in breath? And what caused this? Caused by the smoking. So you can see we have the person. That person should come from the scenario. We add the solution. The solution comes from us. We add the symptom. That one comes from the scenario. And then we add the lifestyle, which also comes from the scenario. Now, when it comes to blood transfusion, so when it comes to blood transfusion, this is content which you really have in the books. So I was just trying to give how you can try here and there. So you can correlate with what you have in the book. Equally here, it is the scenario that will guide you. So they will let you know whether the person is of blood group A, the person is blood group B, or the person is blood group O, the person is blood group AB. But you need to pay attention to whether the person is having any infection that can be transmitted through exchange of infected blood. So if in case a person is having such an infection, then that person should not give blood, even when that person is blood group or where the person would donate to any blood group. So that person's blood will not be safe because the infection that person is having can be transmitted through exchange blood. Then for these other ones, that is subject to the notes that you do have. So you just need to reference your books and ensure that the notes correlate with the expected responses. So keep in mind, you just need now to check with the scenario to identify a person of blood group A. For example, John of blood group A can receive blood from Mary of blood group A since he doesn't produce antibodies to antigen A. That's no agglutination takes place. So meaning within the scenario, they would have told you that you have this person is of blood group A, and then maybe there's that one person of blood group A. But maybe if there is also another person of blood group B, and then you realize that that same person, John of blood group A, cannot receive blood from a person of blood group B, let's say Jack. So since his body produces antibodies to antigen B, thus agglutination takes place. And of course, that will make the blood transfusion unsafe. So the statements continue, but I had already talked about the hepatitis and HIV because such infections can be transmitted through exchange of infected blood. So such people will not be allowed to donate blood, even when they are of blood group O. So we had some sample scenarios here, but because of time, so you may just look through them. We may not go so much in deep, but you can see this person is going to engage in a race over 100 meters. When she's fasting, after the race, she felt a lot of pain, breathed so fast, and her heart was beating so fast. So, and also breathing heavily. So she took posho and beans. So the important thing here is posho and beans and regain the energy to go back home. Implying that when we are talking about digestion, we are talking about digestion of posho and beans. So when you're talking about digestion of starch, you need to mention the source of starch in this scenario. That's the only way you will relate to the scenario. But if you say starch was broken down by this, and there is no source of starch in the scenario, then the rest you'll be writing down will not be coherent. So meaning the starch in the posho, then you continue. The proteins in the beans, then you continue. So since here there is no evidence of cooking or what, so we may not talk about the lipids. So anything we're going to talk about is digestion of starch as well as digestion of proteins. So then it will go through the processes we talked about, the 4 processes. Then eventually for part B, so we shall explain about a lot of pain where it will generate lactic acid and of course generate some energy. We'll talk about breathing so fast, which I explained earlier. We'll talk about her heart beating fast, which I explained earlier, and then breathing so heavily, which will be now taking in oxygen for breaking down lactic acid. So that is the first sample. Then for the second sample, this one is a bit longer, but I'll leave it here. Then maybe you'll get time and revisit the video when it's uploaded so that you can clearly see it, because our time is really coming to an end. So you will revisit it and check. So it continues to that point. So meaning when the video is uploaded, you can pause and write it down and then reference. So you have a mother who is blood group A, you have a brother who is blood group B, have a sister blood group AB, and you have the wife who is blood group O. The mother is HIV positive, the wife is hepatitis B positive. But when you check up here, the person is of blood group A. So in basic knowledge, the mother and the wife would be best candidates to give blood. But you realize that when you check here, so you find that according to the doctor, none of the family members could give blood for transfusion. And they were all shocked, especially the mother and the wife, who were, of course, literally, they should be able to give the blood. So you have to explain a Kang's body normal functioning. Of course, that was explain how a Kang's body normal functioning was affected by the accident. That one is what we discussed about that senior one work. And then to explain to the relatives why they could not donate blood to him. So which we've just talked about. So you revisit and then there you'll be able to pause and then copy down the scenarios, then try them. Possibly your teachers will look through and score accordingly. So that brings us to an end of our presentation today. And in just something like 5 minutes, I'll allow a few questions which I can respond to and we proceed. So if you are ready, you can unmute and ask quickly. Anyone with a question? Power in Christ High School.
No, ask. No, you ask.
Evening, sir.
Yes, how are you?
All right, sir. I would like to know on which item do we find the urine formation?
Oh, that would be that last item under the processes. Item 1 to, sorry, item 6 and 7.
Yes. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other? Noah? Noah is not ready. Any other person who is ready? Anyone has unmuted, please ask your question.
You're requesting
Yes,
to put for last.
The what?
We are requesting to put for last the table for blood group, and we note some content within the table.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Teacher Godfrey, for the wonderful session. And we thank all the schools that have been able to join in the session. I'm still seeing some hands up. I'm still seeing some hands up. Okay. So thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes,
How
please.
can I
Yes.
access the facilitation? How can I access the facilitation item banks?
Item? Yeah, we shall
The facilitation
share.
items.
We shall share on the WhatsApp groups, but also those who have the Padlet link, you'll find those questions there. But also you are going to find the YouTube session. You are going to find the PDF on YouTube as well.
Okay, thank you. Sam,
Yeah.
we are requesting on your number.
Sir, on your number. Sir, we are requesting on your number.
Okay. Teacher Godfrey?
Yes, Teacher Stephen.
Yes. They are requesting for your number, how they can get access to you.
Okay, I'll give you my WhatsApp number, but you don't call. You just send a message.
Yes.
So the number is 0750
Yes.
74
Yes.
88 30.
Yes. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
So you can text me there, then I'll respond to you.
Okay, good night, sir.
Okay. Thank you so
Somebody
much.
again?
Okay. So we shall meet tomorrow for physics practical. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you so much, Teacher Godfrey, for the wonderful session. Those who came in a bit late, you'll find the recording on YouTube, such that you can be able to review some of the things. The band girls, let me wish you a good night, the band, and everyone. Bye bye.